if you look at the history of student populations in science in the country, this is a lot of progress. And sometimes I like to tell students today that it is very easy to get bogged down with everyday bad news, and we have 100 channels, 300 channels TV, and every single one of them is showing something bad. But when you look at the longevity of things that are happening, there's lots to be lots to be positive and proud about, and that's what we'll talk today. So anyway, that's a little bit of our profile in terms of students, and we have great students. And these are just a few snapshots. Our students are achieving great things both while they're here at Mason, and also when they leave. They leave for employment. They leave to really transform the world that we live in. And here are just a few examples of individuals that are doing great things, from going to grad school to doing exciting research, to continuing grad school, and also being award recipients from organizations outside of Mason. This tells you that we are cooking up something very, really good here in the college and in the university. If we look now, not at the students, but at our workforce. So it's, we're about 600 plus employees, 400, almost 500 of them are benefited employees. And the demographics are a little bit different, and you'll see, and I'm going to move a little bit, Tracy, so don't get mad. So if you look at the demographics, they're probably more reflective of not of our student population, but where we are today, right? I think looking at the age distribution, which I think it's here, that's actually, the age distribution. We are, kind of a younger towards middle-aged, overall in terms of staffing. Male to female, we're not quite at 50-50. So, that flip that we have with our undergraduate population hasn't reflected quite here yet. And I think it'll get there in a few years. And when you look at how we're distributed, a good chunk of our staff is instructional faculty, research faculty, adjuncts, and some administration. We will see a little bit later, we are not administration bloated. I mean, that we know, right? And that's going to have some interesting implications in terms of budget, in terms of how we plan. But whoever told you that we're bloated, the data does not support that at all, right? We are a fairly lean running operation, both in terms of human resources themselves, and also in the amount of those human resources that are devoted to our key areas, teaching and research, right? And a little bit of service. So, but anyway, good data to have. We do have this information on a dashboard that's accessible. So this is public information, but it's already good to see in terms of understanding who we are, right? And this was important because we're on the tail end of our strategic planning process. We have a draft plan that a lot of you, if not all of you, contributed to, and that we're really excited about. And that as part of doing that strategic plan, we ask questions about what's our vision, what's our mission, what are our values, and certainly things like student-centric are front and center in our values. We want a vibrant future for all that's informed by science. We want to advance fundamental discoveries to solve societal problems, and in an inclusive way through an inclusive community, right? That's our kind of DNA, or how we're defining our own DNA. These are, I won't read them all because these are contained in our plan and because you've actually seen them before. But these are essentially our 5 big areas of activity, empowering students, enhancing the faculty and staff experience, elevating the impact of our research enterprise, being sustainable in terms of how we grow, and cultivate a culture of engagement and belonging. And we're going to touch base on these aspects and what progress we made during the year that just finished, right? So let's get to business. First of all, across the board performance was really, really well, and it's supported by data. In terms of our enrollment, we had a strong growth in overall enrollment. Our primary source of growth, though, is service to non-majors. And I bring this up because it is important to understand that even though we exist as a standalone college, we exist as a strong standalone college. One of our key strengths is that we interact with so many other colleges and provide this service. And I'll give you some figures. And our graduate growth is a little bit challenged. It doesn't show the same growth that we've seen at the undergraduate level. But we had a 5% annual growth over the last year. That means that fall 23 with respect to fall 22, there's 5% more. That's big. We grew 11% in out of state, which tells you that we're attractive. We're an attractive proposition to out of state students. Out of state students means out of Virginia. So it's not other students in Virginia that choose to go to Mason as opposed to UVA or Virginia Tech or VCU or what. These are out of state students. These are students from other parts of the country and other parts of the world too. In our research enterprise, we had significant growth in new awards, and we'll get into that a little bit. And we also had an improved success rate of proposal submission. That means the hit rate, the number of proposals that were funded versus when we submitted, grew up significantly. And that's also very good news. So 10% growth in net awards with respect to fiscal year 22. That means that during that year, last year, we grew 10% in terms of new awards with respect to the same period in 22, okay, which is fantastic. And our proposal success rate was about 20%. That means 1 in 5. And we were about 1 in 7 to 1 in 8 in the previous 2 years. So this is a good thing, and it could be, I mean, we're going to have to monitor this to see if it's an artifact of us actually writing better proposals or some combination of writing lesser but better. We have to look at those numbers more carefully, but it's really something to brag about. In terms of advancement, fiscal year 23 was a record year, and fiscal year 22 had been a record year before. So we're breaking and breaking, right? I really thank our advancement team for that. And so we hit 2.1 million in fiscal year 23. We had raised 1.9 in 22, and that was already a record year. We have a 15 million target for the Mason Now campaign, which launched earlier this year. I'll talk a little bit about that. So we need to raise 15 million in the next 5 to 6 years, and we're 2+ into it. So I'm not feeling so bad. I'm not saying this is a job done. We still have 4 or 5 years to go, so it's still ways to go. That's a lot of work. In terms of our new access, belonging, community engagement, we have made a lot of strides, and I'll give you some examples. But I wanted to reiterate this. So this statement is straight out of the strategic plan. So our values include fostering an organizational culture that promotes inter-racism, belonging, respect, and civility. That last word I like a lot, and I've been talking about that since I joined, right? We are a diverse organization. We will always be. We need to treat each other with respect. We need to listen to each other. And this boils down to being civil to each other. It's not rocket science, right? It is about just, being people that respect other people. Very, very, very commonsensical. So, but that's part of our core culture, right? Let's kind of spell out some of these things. This is total headcount. The university's total headcount during fiscal year 23 went up 1.2% and 1.7% in credit hours, right? And with respect to fall of 22. So that is actually very healthy growth for the university as a whole. College of Science did in the same categories, 5% headcount, 4% in credit hours. That's about 3 times the size of the university's average. All right. Our out-of-state growth for the university occurred also 3.4% in headcount. We did 10% in headcount and 11% in credit hours, which tells you that there is an opportunity to capitalize on that market. So that's the growth rate. That doesn't mean that the out-of-state is a super fraction of what we're doing, but it does indicate that there is room for growth there, right? This is at the undergraduate level. At the undergraduate level, we went up 6 and 5, so 6 in headcount, 5 in credit hours, for out of state, we went 7% in headcount and 13% in credit hours. So that means this is out of state individuals who are enrolled at Mason, who are taking our classes. Grew by 13% with respect to fall of 2022. So this is an increase in 1 year, double digit. All right, this is important. The graduate front news is not super that encouraging, but we may be expecting this. But first of all, the university went down 2% and 1% down. That means with respect to 22, we had less graduate students, headcount, and less credit hours. We kind of stayed flat in both headcount and credit hours at the college level. In out of state, however, again, those numbers go up. That might be driven by international for the most part. Still, it's an area where we can grow. And so it does give you some indication of where you can allocate some resources. Now, and you know this already, of course, just getting the students enrolled, it's like the tip of the iceberg, just the beginning of the task. How do we keep them here? And we've been looking at this, and I wanted to highlight a program that Val Olmo is running and Jerry in biology, which I found very exciting. And the more I hear about it and the more I learn, and it has to do not only with retaining students, but actually with the differential rates of retention between students of different groups. So our minoritized student make up of in biology about 30% of the freshman cohorts, right? And you can see the last 3 years, well, not the last 3 years, but the last 3 years preceding 2019. So we're using data for control purposes to eliminate the COVID effect, prior to COVID, right? But those numbers hold, percentage-wise, hold still today. And but when we look at individuals, students that switch majors out of biology, and more likely out of the college, out of science, we see that in the loss is much larger in minoritized students. And so we're losing a larger proportion of students that compose a significant fraction of our population. So that's like losing your best customers, almost like if this were a business, right? And differentially. So first of all, we lose across the board, which is not good. We need to focus on retention, not only enrollment, but also how do we keep more of a fraction that allows us to retain, that diversity. And that's what's happening here. You're losing diversity, right? This is going to become very relevant because I'm going to show you some enrollment numbers here. This is for the university as a whole, right? So these are projections. So the university is looking to grow in different categories, but our undergraduate student body, I mean, overall, we're gonna top out roughly at about 40,000, 45,000, right? We just scratched 40,000 this year. We're probably going to grow over the next, 6 to 7 years. We're going to grow another 5,000, and the projections after that look pretty flat. So we're going to reach kind of an equilibrium, a steady state in the number of students. So then the effort needs to be concentrated not on bringing more people on the front door. It's actually keeping the people that you have inside well served, and that so retention is going to be a big part of what we do. And we are starting now, and that's why programs like I Am Biology is a great, it's a great initiative. Last year, and you've probably also heard, this dialogue going around. It's this demographic cliff and demographic crash about the fact that in a few years, the number of high school students who are eligible to go to college is going to drop dramatically because birth rates have dropped dramatically in the past couple of decades, right? But when we look at the demographics of the DMV and the student population that we are serving, we don't see that cliff. What we see is essentially a tapering off. We're not in the same situation. This came up when very recently, the most recent example is the comparison to West Virginia University, and there was all this thing, they're cutting programs and cutting faculty and cutting staff, and we're not there. Not only we're not there, there's no indication that we're going to approach a situation where we need to cut people and staff and faculty. We will, however, as I'll say, and we will rationalize that, we need to be a little bit more deliberate about where we invest increasingly scarce resources, right? And an analogy that I like to make is that if we want to put some other stuff in our plates, we're going to have to take some stuff off our plates, okay? Because the plate is going to be of a finite size. This growth that we have been seeing, growth, it is going to stop in a few years. And that means that we are going to have to start thinking about, how are we more efficient? How we better deliver our programs? At the same time of how do we, keep an atmosphere where faculty and staff feel productive, feel happy, satisfied. We're going to have to think about those things, right? And that's the kind of normal kind of aging of an institution, right? Research, very promising. In fiscal year 23, the one thing I wanted to highlight that I liked is that we grew about 10% in new awards with respect to 22, and 22 was already, 21 was a little bit weird because we had all that extra COVID funding, so we had $51 million in 2021 of new awards. That ain't coming back anytime soon. But actually scratching 40, I like, because that means that our expenditures, which are in the next column, our expenditures for next year will grow. Maybe they won't grow 10%, but they'll grow significantly, right? And with research, the question is a little bit different, because I think with research there is room for growth. The question is, well, if we're going to make growth happen, and that's an area where we want to concentrate, we need to make some adjustments, and that came out in the strategic discussions that we were having during our strategic plan, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So we look at expenditures. Expenditures are on the rise, and the university in fiscal year 23, the university had expenditures of $173 million. We're about 21% of that, the college. This is the college, we are different in the sense that this is all research conducted in the college. A lot of universities, I've been part of one, you know how to play those numbers by engaging in large research awards that are largely subcontracted. You keep the big number to yourself, but you're not executing. Here, our number, that $37 million of expenditures, we are executing. It is our scientists, our faculty, our research staff, our students that do that research, right? And that means a lot, right? I do think that growth, however, in research is going to involve more collaborations, and that actually came out in the strategic plan. So interdisciplinary collaborations with industry, international, again, because, syncing in with the out-of-state potential, large research initiatives, which require, larger teams, and managing workloads. And this is something, particularly in managing workloads, we have made some progress this year in terms of at least recognizing the fact that we have to do this, right? And we have an updated college policy, which I think took a lot of doing, and it's fantastic. That allows essentially to move around teaching and research loads to optimize allocation of resources. So anyway, growth in enrollment, growth in research, so far so good. Let's talk about the campaign a little bit, because fundraising, it's a big part of how we generate additional resources. So the university is undergoing a $1 billion campaign. The campaign was recently named as Mason Now. Within the 1 billion, our target as a college is 15 million. All right. And the first time I saw that number, I had two reactions. One reaction was, what? Why are we so small? The second reaction is, well, we're so small, so maybe we'll get there, right? So, two reactions. But I'll tell you, because so these numbers were not pulled out of the air, right? These were what the university is doing is a very, very organized effort around reaching specific donors and which college, right, out of the 11 that the university has, is going to be reaching each individual donor. Each individual donor has a potential, what do we call this? Potential giving potential, right? And that's how you come up with, so we were assigned a smaller size of the pie based on also the giving potential of the donors that can be, that are amenable to give to the College of Science. So it's a very, very well rationalized number. And the number is really 15 to 20, and it's really about generating resources primarily for student support and program support, right? And this is, it's to support our educational programs, it's to support our research programs to some degree, but more importantly, to support our students. So this is a little bit of the timeline. It is a 5 to 6 year, and when we say 5 to 6 years, because we started officially in the spring of 23. So, I mean, we're there now, but the campaign was launched in April of 23. And it runs probably through the end of 28 or mid 2029, depending on how things go. But given where we are, and if you do the math, so this is it's a little bit of a boring table, but that's us, right? And that's the $50 million target. Technically it's the feasible range is 10 to 30. 15 was a good place to land, maybe 20. And if you look at it over 6 years, this is roughly 2.5 per year. And if you look at our history, well, that's us again. This is the pie, this small slice, right? But if you look at our history, this is last 10 years of fundraising advancement in the college. Like I said, fiscal year 22 and 23 have been records. 2.1 is our record. That's what we did in fiscal year 23. That's still below our annual target of 2.5. So even though we've been increasing, even though it's the largest we've done, even though it's quite sizable, we're still, that's why I'm saying, we're still not at the pace where we need to be. So this means that we're going to have to engage vigorously in me in particular, I'm going to have to engage vigorously in doing this, and our team. And the reason I'm no concern is because we have a great team. So, but it's still, very good achievement. In terms of access, belonging, community engagement, formerly AJEDI, now ABCE, we have launched a new website. We have a new plan. Paula and her team have been working very diligently. Lots of great ideas, And I'm very pleased with the progress that I'm seeing in integrating ABCE throughout our operation. I think in many ways that's going to be part of our secret sauce because of the kind of students that we're going after, because of where we are geographically, because of which portions of those populations are growing. Being diverse is our secret sauce. We need to be very mindful of that, and invest accordingly and act accordingly. You know, one of the things I reflect upon as I think about, after you've been dean for 3 years, you start asking for what's the meaning of being a dean, right? I cannot teach your classes for you, right? I cannot write proposals or papers for you. What I can do as dean, and what the dean's office can do for you as researchers, as staff, as students, is to facilitate conditions so that allow you to do your work in a more productive way, right? It's and that's the primary role here, and that primary role translates into creating an atmosphere where you can feel productive. And that means the civility, that means the belonging, that means the sense of community. And that's a little bit of what we're working towards here. So we've established a couple of support teams. We've created a staff advisory working group committee. And we also created an AJEDI, which is also probably going to be an ABCE advisory committee of faculty and staff that will definitely have my ears in terms of what needs to be done to have this be an increasingly better place to work. And I'm not talking compensation just yet. I think that's going to continue to be a big part of it. I think it's something that where we can show we've made progress, but this is not the compensation part. This is the, like being nice people part of the job, right? I don't know how else to say it, right? But it's being nice to each other, it's being respectful, it's being collegial, right? I think we're doing a good job in that front, but I think we can do better, and we'll continue to work on creating, those conditions. And I think getting advice directly from staff, from faculty, as well as from students, because we're working on that too, right? A student advisory committee, it's gonna go a long way in doing that, right? One example of these activities are these, compassionate conversations workshop. I did the one and I want to say it was in April, but could have been earlier than April. It was earlier in the spring this year. I know that we're doing another series of those. I think the next one is on October 26th. And I promised Paul I would put the link here, so it's you're going to get these slides, and it's also on the ABCE website, as well as in our intranet. So anyway, I think particularly when you look around the world today, and you can actually pick a day and there's some issue going on that's weird, right? And the majority of the times is an inability to talk and trying to reach some agreement, consensus, or at least agree to disagree, but not not do it in an aggressive way. I think as human beings, we have a long way to go, and I think these activities, even though we think, oh, we got this, we understand this, it's good to participate because you always learn something new. We all have hidden biases. We all have our own background, our own conditions that make us behave a certain way. I think it's important to try to look at a little bit more 360 of the world and other people. So anyway, a plug for a great activity. And in addition to that, and this is something that we've been toying around, and now we've gotten around doing it. I'm excited about this. Is having a way to provide, first of all, provide a venue and a mechanism for individuals to exchange ideas. In that exchange of ideas, we will get we probably get initiatives or get new ways of thinking that allow us to do activities that we may not be thinking now in improving this atmosphere, but also opening up a kind of a permanent feedback venue, right? Where completely anonymous, you can let us know what's going on, how we can help, right? And I think that's going to be also very beneficial. Completely anonymous, no big brother, no weird stuff going in the background, right? No one checking, your IP address or whatever it is. This is really anonymous. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Let's talk finances, because listen, enrollment's great, research is great, development is great. Even though that in the middle of May of this year, we learned that the university had a budget shortfall in its operating budget. Operating budget means the kind of the permanent budget, and the size of the budget whole was about $41 million, which was roughly about 6 to 7% of the operating budget. So 6 to 7% it's not big enough to be catastrophic, like to start cutting programs and laying people off. It's also not small enough that you can just swipe it under the rug and absorb it. So what I'll tell you is that the shortfall didn't happen, at least in a clear way, inside the college, right? But as good community members, part of the university, we've been asked to absorb, some of that cut, right? So, but I'll tell you, let me give you a sense of numbers. So, for fiscal year 23, we had received a budget authorization. So this is the spending authority of about $61 million. That's here. This is what we were told in July of 22. This is how much money you get to go to the movies this coming year, all right? And buy snacks. We ended up being fairly rational, being the sensible, responsible college that we are. We ended up spending 58.6, okay? Which means that we spent 2.4 million less than allocated. In a regular year, you get to bank these 2.4 million and put it in a place that are called one-time expenses or one-time funds that we use for a variety of things, right? We use them for a lot of things, right? They do have some constraints, but we use them. But then we were told, well, you know what? Even though you're growing 5% in enrollment, that's great. We need to cut your budget 3.8 million. 3.8 million is our share of the 41 loss for the university, okay? So I'm thinking, well, it's good I didn't spend these 2.4, because at least I know that, I'm a little bit more than halfway there, right? But still absorbing the 3.8, it's no easy task, right? So we spend a good fraction of the summer developing a plan to shed those 3.8 million from our budget, which means that, and I'll show you what that means in a second, in terms of what that means for fiscal year 24 and beyond, right? So, and we are now in fiscal year 24, so the budget cut was immediate. It's not like you get to do this next year. No, it's we're in May, and in July you got to start doing this, and we need a plan, so which we did. We'll get back to that, but let me give you a picture of the research budget. It's again, we got about 40 plus million in research awards, which generate about 9 million of indirects. We are, even though we're not the largest research funded unit in the university, we are the largest indirect generator, okay? And that's really because the other college that generates more revenue than we do research-wise does a lot of subcontracting, and that goes without the indirect. So actually that takes indirect, and that's the reason they have a bigger number to show, but a smaller number indirect, right? So anyway, I played that game. I know how it works. And in all fairness, if we want to grow our research operation, we're going to have to play that game, but that'll come later. But when I tell people, if you look at the 60 plus in kind of education in general, E&G, budget and the research, we're roughly 100 plus million operation a year, right? So it is a big college, right? When you look at colleges of sciences across research universities, we're not small, and that goes because we have 4,000 students, because we serve 12,000 students, because we have $40 million in research. We are a big operation. Now, the question is, so if we, if we're growing in enrollment, if we're growing in research, if we're growing in advancement, how come we get penalized, with a hefty 6 or 7% cut, right? Immediately, right? It is something difficult to swallow, right? But then you have to understand, and this is the forensic exercise that we did, is to try to understand whether this actually made sense, right? And what we're arriving at collectively, discussing this across the university, is that we're probably, so when this budget allocation, when this budget authorization gets issued, they look at our enrollment, right, or expected enrollment, and they make a calculation, right? And the issue is that calculation doesn't quite fit with the expenses that we're actually incurring. That means that we're getting, and I'll say this very openly, we're getting a lot of services for our students and our faculty and our staff from the university that are not charged to the college. Those units that provide those services are losing money, and that's where we are in the hole. So even though we did not generate the hole, at least not on paper, I can see how we need to contribute to solving that. So that's a little bit of that rationale, right? But let me tell you, so the not so dire news. I think, so that's our kind of our underspending. A little bit of more constraints. So how are we spending our money, right? Those 61 million or 58.7 million fiscal year 23. We spend, and look at those numbers from between fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 23, the last 4 years. We spend upwards of 80% and now upwards of 90% of those 58 plus million in salaries, and a small fraction in other stuff. Others, total direct expenditures is Megan's fancy way of saying all other stuff that's not salaries. All right. This, if you need to cut budget and you have this picture, this gives you little flexibility to do, I mean, we could say, okay, we're going to cut people, and then, but we're understaffed already. We don't want to do that, right? But this gives us an additional constraint. So whatever we have to absorb, we're going to have to absorb out of out of these other, right? These other things, okay? And not a whole lot of wiggle room. Then so this is percentage wise, and these are the actual numbers, right? So in fiscal year 23, we spent almost $54 million in salaries, and 4.8 million other things are not salaries. That's the 58.7 million that we spent in fiscal year 23, right? If we need to make a cut of 3.8 million there, well, I can probably cut almost all of this stuff. It's probably not feasible. So we're gonna have to do something. And fortunately, we were able to look at some things, and the solution was here, or the solution is partly in this number, in what we did not spend, right? So 3.8 is our total budget reduction. We're going to be able to meet that by using indirects, and that's something that it's going to be this is going to be like a temporary thing, right? The indirects of the college, right? We're not messing with the indirects of the researchers or the centers. We're going to take advantage of the fact that we haven't been doing probably as much hiring as our budget would indicate we had the capability to do. And this is an approach that's going on across the university. We had, you've seen that, because particularly, unit heads that are trying to hire people, it is not easy to hire people, just because it's a very competitive market. Fortunately, quote unquote, this year that worked for us because it allowed us to save some money that was cut anyway, right? I would have not liked to be in this position. See, if we had not been underspent last year and we had to cut 3.8, this would be a problem. This will be a problem. It is not a problem now, because we can, instead of cutting individuals, we're going to cut vacancies, and it's not as rosy a picture as I make it sound, but it is much better. Okay, because we can manage this, and the indirects are going to help us manage this over time. So we're going to be cutting also in kind of two stages. We're going to do about half reduction in 2024 and half reduction in 2025, which we've been enabled to do because we underspend in 2023, right? So this is a little bit of the picture of how fiscal year 23 budget looked like, and how 24 and 25 are going to look like. Okay, and this is where I think there's some good news. So our budget authorization was 61 million in 23. It's going to be 60.3 million in 24 and 25. The reason it's not a full cut is because we also got a budget a compensation adjustment back in late spring, where that was added about 2.4 million, 2.5 million to our budget. But we have to go from 61 to 60, right? And the figures are here, and of course I'll share the slide. But the things that I wanted to point out first is that academic departments are actually, as a percentage of the pie, are going to receive a larger portion of the budget. Okay, and if we were looking at 61 before and 60 now, but you go from 44 to 46, you're actually going to be better resourced. Okay, even under a budget cut. Where's that cut going to come from? Well, in looking at how we spend our money, we have a fairly large amount of research activity that is funded by education in general. That means that we have been investing essentially what amounts to tuition money in the research operation. That is okay, and that is done, but it's typically done as a kind of a startup fund, right? So it's like you start a center that's going to promise to generate revenue, and the college allocates a chunk of money to get you started so you can get your time, write proposals, etc. What has been happening historically in many of the centers is that we started giving them, I'm going to just throw some numbers out there. We're going to give Center X $500K per year to kind of get you started. And then it should have said, well, this should be for 3 years, 5 years, whatever, how long it takes. But what has been happening is that it has never stopped. And then we kept adding research centers under the same scheme. And then what we have now is a fairly large research operation that is funded by education and general funds. And that's not actually how research or one universities work, right? Our research operations need to be self-sustainable. There will be a startup investment, but then they have to recover. So, oops, did I miss here? Okay. So we are looking very closely at sunsetting, some of those annual allocations. And I know this may not be good news for particular research centers, but I tell you, if we're if we're decreasing the investment we're making, it'll be well rationalized and it will be discussed with you ad nauseum, right? But we have a plan, right? Another area we'll be making significant cuts is to the college administration. Again, we're not bloated, but we can probably be more efficient. We are, as some of you may know, we're conducting a college-wide administrative assessment, looking at our administrative costs and the typical question, how many individuals does it take to do this activity, right? And trying to benchmark ourselves with other institutions, try to understand if our cost structure is rational, right? I get the sense, and I've been very vocal about this, that we have a lot of administrative inefficiencies in the college in how we administer the funds. Right? So I do think there are opportunities to save significantly there, but we'll get a formal assessment. And I'll give you an example. So and this was in advising. So when I came in, the advising team, Donna Fox was very vocal about this. Is we're understaffed. I said, okay, so let's get a baseline, right? And we did get the baseline, and it turns out that the industry standard roughly, and this number surprised me when I heard it the first time, is about one advisor per 250 FTE students, which to me sounds ridiculous low. I mean, I would say it's a lot. But that apparently is the standard, right? It's because, so one advisor can take care of 250 students. Still, when I say it out loud, sounds unbelievable. That's the standard. We were well over 300 to 1 ratio, well over 300. So we immediately say, okay, so let's at least go back to that standard. But it takes that assessment to be able to rationalize and justify the investments, right? And we're going to be doing this across the board, right? And I think we'll get efficiencies. Anyway, I think it's the second best positive news. I mean, I could have told you that we're going to grow our budget, and I can't tell you that today because we have a fixed boundary condition. But I think this is not a bad alternative. Anyway, we'll continue our operating challenges and sometimes difficult decisions, slowing hiring, slowing some of our spending while we get back on our feet. I think the reserves are that we have in the college can be used temporarily, but may not be a long-term option. I mean, we can charge some things to one-time funds, but we cannot do this indefinitely. So. And we'll work on more structural things like policy changes. The workload policy is a good example of that. The university is looking at retirement incentives and maybe some reorganizations. We're going to have those discussions. And by the way, the reorganizations and the policy changes are in our strategic plan. So it's not something we're creating out of thin air. And looking at overall our business models, right, and how we allocate our resources. So I think this is, I think the situation is very manageable. I think we'll come out of it stronger and certainly leaner and more efficient. And I'll reiterate, because I've been asked this a lot, and I'll keep saying it. In none of the calculations that I've seen, and I've seen more spreadsheets than you'll ever want to know. We're in no scenario where we'll be reducing personnel. And I know this come up and I've had discussions where I say this publicly and then I'm grabbed privately. Are you really sure we're not? I says no. If you ask me in private, it's going to be no. If you ask me in public, it's going to be no, because it's no, because we have the numbers to back that up. So wanted to put that out there while I'm being recorded, right? So you can take me at my word. Anyway, in terms of next steps, we will continue to leverage our community to implement our strategic plan. We have a roadmap. I think we're going to have to probably stage it a little bit more. We're not going to be able to do, like the movie, everything, everywhere, all at once, as we thought back as early as May of 2023, right? So, but I think we can do a lot of things, particularly things that can make us more efficient financially wise. We will continue investments in our staff and faculty to better serve our students. the fact that and that's why I wanted to show the pie charts. The pie charts tell you that we're going to slow down, rationalize our hiring, but we're going to continue to hire. This is important because if we're growing enrollment 5%, you have to make those investments. All right, it's very, the math there is very easy, right? We're going to continue working our ABC goals and initiatives, and we're going to engage vigorously in the fundraising campaign. The reason I say that is because not only because we have that target, which I think it's fine, but also because that's an additional source of revenue. Lots of ideas have come from those discussions we had during our strategic planning. I think we're going to be looking at those ideas that have multiple benefits, and I'll give you one idea that's actually that's been further discussed. So we have the Bachelor's to Accelerate Master's, so-called BAMS programs, right? And so what if we were to do BAMS programs with institutions other than Mason? That means that we concoct a deal that we can offer to other universities, right? Where we say, hey, we'll give you 9 credits towards your graduate degree or whatever it is. I don't know what the number is, right? First of all, it'll help with graduate enrollment, which we know it's a problem, right? It will generate resources because even if they have to take 20 credits instead of 30 to be with us, those 20 credits are going to be paid for. So that's a lesser percentage of a bigger amount, okay? So it helps you with the finances. And if you do this with the right institutions, you can actually increase your diversity numbers. If you do this with HBCUs, with MSIs, that will like to come to Mason. Mason is an attractive proposition. Our out-of-state numbers are telling us that already. If we were to offer something like that, it's like a triple win. It's like a triple bottom line. You hit graduate enrollment, you hit diversity, and you hit revenue. Boom. Those solutions are going to be the kinds of things that we're looking for. And by the way, this idea is brilliant. It would have never occurred to me. This came out of your discussions, okay? Which is why having your participation is critical. Share your feedback on through this anonymous mechanism that we've established. We have a new intranet that we invite you to visit and participate in. Of course, we have our several social media handles that you can follow us from, and I want to thank you really. As the more and more I work in this college, the more and more I get to know you better, and I get to know your programs better. I need to get your areas of work better. I'm really having, like that old song used to say, I'm having the time of my life, and I'm having a lot of fun. And I also think that we're doing something great, and it's not because I feel it, even though that's, totally one reason, but our performance shows it as well, right? The fact that we have to do tweaks, it's only because we're going to get better. The fact that we have to overcome a budget cut that we didn't ask for and we didn't foresee, well, sometimes, what's the other movie quote? Life's like a box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer questions and about anything that I covered today or anything else that you want to ask. And again, thanks for being here. Thanks for for giving me the privilege or allowing me the privilege of being your dean. Thank you.
In the room. We've also had
Yep.
questions that have been submitted online.
Fantastic.
Since the conversation started.
Fantastic.
Do you want us to start with some of those first? Laura has those, or does
I
anybody
think
have
while the audience starts getting their arms stretched to grace them, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the first question that came in is regarding the Mason Now campaign. Why is Mason Now targeting large donors and not promoting specific high visibility, high interest programs to a broader range of potential donors?
I think so. I would need to understand better where that statement comes from or the question comes from, but I'll tell you that we're swiping donors from the 25 million up to donors in the less than $100. And each of those donors has a name. And each of those donors has been assigned a college, has been assigned a development officer, and we are pursuing them. Again, from the smaller to the largest, so it's not just large donors. The matching to the colleges and the matching to has to do with precisely the programs that reside within our college. So someone who is interested in biomedical or biology or forensic science, those are going to come to us regardless of the size. So I think I've seen and I've studied, because that's the list of donors is like my hit list, right? It is the people that I'm going to have to meet with and talk to and try to engage. It is very, very varied. It is across the board. It's geographically, very, very varied as well. It's not just in Virginia. So I don't know if that answers the question, but we're not just targeting big donors or specific programs. We're really doing a thorough, and I'll tell you, this is the other thing I'll tell you. So thanks for asking that question, is that if you know of someone who has the potential to donate some money to a specific program in our college, please let me know. I'll be happy to court this individual. Want to go with another one online or here or?
Okay, so the second question is regarding our conversation surrounding the budget. Do we yet have a plausible and believable and complete explanation for the budget deficit? And the second part of that is, we're being asked to work harder to get the same product we were already all working on.
Mm-hmm.
So it is inevitable that, what does he say? Oh, wait.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the question I meant to ask. Sorry, this is from Chris Jones. Sorry,
Okay.
Chris. Oh no, this is a follow-up from Bob. So I'm kind of combining two questions.
Okay.
So Chris wants to know if there's an explanation for the budget deficit, but Bob also asks, there are other academic units that have been, are there other academic units that have been more responsible for the shortfall, or are there other ones that are also participating? And then will there be any institutional memory later when the money is less tight? And will units like us make out better in light of helping now disproportionately?
No, it's great question. And I wish I could give you a fuller answer, because those questions are what people like to say above my pay grade. So, but I will tell you what I know, right? So, in terms of have we been given a full explanation? We have been told more or less what I relayed earlier, right? That our budget projection for fiscal year 23 for the university, not for the college, for the university, the actual expenditures versus the budget projection, there was a 41 million gap, right? We also know that within the current budget model, our college did not create that gap. I do not know if other colleges have that gap or created a gap. I cannot tell, because I do not have access to other colleges' budgets. But I'll offer a hypothetical, not hypothetical. I'll offer an explanation that I was discussing with colleagues maybe about a month ago. Budget projections are not perfect predictions. Since I do numerical modeling, I know this well, right? And you try to predict the weather, right? And you predict tomorrow is going to be 60% rainy, and it's not 60, it's 50, or it's 40, or it's 70, right? There's an error to your prediction, and I think what happened to Mason in fiscal year 23 is a combination of conditions that led to a forecast budget that was not met, okay? I will tell you also that during fiscal year 23, there were lots of forcings on our budget, including a number of compensation adjustments that jiggled, so that added uncertainty to that projection. That's at least a way I found it to explain it to myself. And I think it's a plausible explanation. And with respect to the future in terms of who pays for what a year or two from now, I mean, the university, as you know, is in a state now of leadership transition. We're going to get a new provost, you know, in a matter of, I would say my prediction would be in less than a year. We're already, by the way, I'm part of the search committee that was announced, or that will be announced. I'm not sure if the announcement is public yet, but I am a member of the search committee. We're going to have a new provost, and that's going to, I mean, having worked for a provost for the past 3.5 years, I know that the provost and the policies that the provost office puts in place have a big impact on those, precisely those answers. So I don't have answers to those questions now. We're going to have to play the game. So. What else? You can't tell me that everything that I explained was super clear, because I had to like go through the presentation a number of times just so I could understand it. So what else can I answer? Yeah, go ahead.
So we have a question about graduate enrollment in relation to the statement that graduate growth is limited. The question is, how will we catalyze greater graduate enrollment by recruiting more faculty able and willing to serve as advisors, incentives for faculty to advise and graduate more graduate students, or by creating alternative funding to GTAships as Advance moves formerly GTA staffed 100 level lab courses enrollment to Virginia community colleges? Yes, so that's a great question. Listen, one of the areas that we know for a fact, because we've benchmarked this is graduate student funding, and that's an area where, so not only do we fund less number of students, but actually the funding per student is also smaller than many institutions. And this area, it's not an inexpensive area to live in, right? As you know, all of us know, of course. So that's that is definitely a priority area to invest, and we we will be looking at that, and we are actually looking at that now in terms of how much we can allocate. Yeah. I have another budget question. Yeah. How does the college's science budget cuts compare to other units? Are they contributing equally? Right. So not equally. So what the university did was it allocated not only to the colleges, but also to other parts. So, athletics and student services. I mean, every single unit that essentially reports up to the president, including the colleges, were allocated a share of the overall cut. The share was calculated based on the number of FTE, faculty, and staff. So larger colleges, that means colleges that have more individuals on their payroll, got a larger cut, and so on, right? So it was kind of proportional to that. Do we still have time for other questions? Yes. Okay, great. We did have a question come in regarding position vacancies. So someone commented, aren't vacancies occurring in vital positions? What happens to the jobs that those people who left were doing? They are either not getting done or the work overloads the rest of us. Yep. There was a reason that there was a position and then a vacancy. Yeah. So the way we're looking at this is, we're going to slow down filling vacancies. That doesn't mean we're going to just eliminate completely, vacancies. And the university established a process that, a lot of people, including myself, are not terrible fans of, but it is kind of fulfilling a purpose, is to identify critical vacancies. And that's why, when we want to hire anyone, we need to fill a critical vacancy request and justify that. And some of those elements go into that, right? And we've been able to, fill some vacancies, and we're still hiring. It's not like we, shut down completely.
but we need to identify those vacancies. We need to prioritize because we can't, and just remember what I showed you. We're 90% of our expenditures are people, right? And their compensation. We are undergoing a cut and we're raising compensation. There's another compensation adjustment that's coming at the end of this year, not fiscal year, but actual calendar year. So at the end of 23. So all of that is going to put pressure on the allocation of funds. So we're going to have to look at this and prioritize. And it's not going to be done by me, in my, sitting in my corner office there, right? It's not going to happen only with chairs. We're going to be, if there is a vacancy in your unit, we will talk to you and figure out, try to figure out if that's actually critical, again, trying to achieve efficiencies. And this question gives me the opportunity to also share something that we've been thinking about as well. Is that so? How do we take our portfolio of obligations, of administrative, academic, and distribute those better in more an efficient way among the individuals that we have, which may mean, right, in some cases, that there'll be opportunities for professional development. And for growth, and hopefully that will be the case, right? So we're also looking at not just having you continue to do your job, forever, but trying to kind of project a path where we can gain efficiencies and try to serve professional development as well. Yeah.
Okay, we have another from online. While budget resources are a big concern, so are space resources such as classroom space, office space, and student collaboration spaces. How is this being addressed? Moving off of the Fairfax campus is not a reasonable solution for every department. Yeah, so the issue of space is a great one, right? And I think space is overdue in this university for a rethink. We're going to have to look at in a hybrid working environment, which we have, which I particularly as dean in this college have promoted. I've told people, listen, I want you to have work-life balance. If that means that you can fulfill your work, having a mix of where you sit, go for it. Absolutely. But at the same time, that opens up the possibility of looking at the space we have. And I'll give you just a hypothetical example. If someone, can do their job being here 2 times a week as opposed to 5 days a week, do I need to have a permanent space allocated 5 days a week instead of 2, right? Can we play around with that concept that many institutions, this is not rocket science also, this is something that's been done with institutions across the higher ed space, the private sector space, the public sector space. Who would think that the federal government will be an innovator in space allocation? They are. This concept of hoteling, right? So you establish, private spaces, but that can be rotated among several people, right? And we're going to have to create opportunities like that and think creatively about items like that. Again, not something that we're going to do overnight, but it is something that we need to put on the table because in this environment, we're going to have to rationalize the use of space. Mm-hmm. What's the status of the medical school? Is that still happening?
I wish I knew. I keep asking that question. I do. The clean answer, I don't know. I think the idea gained a little bit of momentum earlier this year before May, before we were told about this. I suspect that when the budget is stabilized, right, which we're very close to, I think the conversation may come up again. Right now, there's no concrete plans or no concrete announcements.
Either the president or Ken Walsh said it's been chilled.
Yes. Yes, it's been put on hold, but not eliminated. So yes.
So I have a question. My question is about what parts of our organization might be moving to Mason Fuse, or there was some discussion about some folks moving to the SciTech campus. That building is almost done. Can you give a little bit of a timeline for how the new facilities may change our composition?
Right. So so the Life Sciences and Engineering building at SciTech is actually one of the only two new buildings that are going up in any campus, right? And the other one is in Arlington, right, in Fuse. So those are the two campuses that are growing in some form. So the only thing, and I've been in meetings about strategic planning in both sites, et cetera, and there's, other than stating that we should move some programs and some people here, that's where the conversation has pretty much, stalled. So I think that conversation is upcoming. It is part of this larger conversation about space that we need to be having, because moving across campuses, I know it's not, well, maybe some people are eager to do it, but maybe others or the majority won't be. It's a conversation that needs to be had, but there's no there's no list of people that have been targeted to move or anything like that. Those we're not even close to that discussion. But if we're building something, you would think that we want to populate it, right? So I mean, I think it will happen. I mean, I think we'll,
Thank you.
Yeah. What else? Listen, we had the best performance here since I've been here. I haven't been here for super long, but it is my best, so I'm very happy. I'd be happier if we didn't get that 3.8 million cut, but but I'll reiterate. Listen, I know we have our challenges, but try to look at also the positive that has transpired, right? Oh, yeah, there's another question. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Can you comment on the effect of advance on GTA positions?
So I can give you a relatively, I'm not a super expert on the data or on but it is advance and the leverage that we can gain out of advance, I think will be a strategic weapon for us to recruit, to recruit more grad students, get them paid better, increase diversity. It's again one of those triple benefit, solutions, right? So definitely is something that we want to stay engaged. I want to promote because it is only a win. There's no lose there, right? So those are the sort of low-hanging fruit that we need to pursue. Yeah. Okay, so let me finish my. If there are no more questions, no more. Not from the room either. Dieter, no. Okay. Dieter just wants to leave, right? And grab his third cookie as he leaves. So I'll tell you. Listen, we had a great year. You should all feel proud. You should all feel accomplished. And when even though I can understand reasons why you may feel down at times and progress isn't coming fast enough, I get you. I hear you, because in many ways that it's also my case, right? It's like I would like to get some targets quicker, right? And have more funding for grad students, more better populated graduate programs, and better compensated faculty. But then when I look at what we have actually accomplished and since the time that we're here, and particularly in this year that just passed, we've done a lot, and that's not me, that's you, right? And my job is to try to get the obstacles out of your way to the extent that I can, and I'll continue doing that. But I encourage you to go out there and continue doing your best, and I know you are. I think probably the one thing that I'll reiterate, and I know that this is sometimes it's not easy to do, is to reach out if we can be of help, and we'll, you know, and reaching out and looking for help, it's not a sign of weakness. It never is. It's also not a sign that we'll be able to solve your problem just at once. I wish, but we will work with you to make it better. And that's I think that's the important thing that counts. I've tried to do an effort in terms of conveying the notion that when you reach out to us, even if it's to be critical, right? Even if it's to be critical, even if it's to tell me, Fernando, you're doing a crappy job, right? All right, cool. Listen, no retaliation, no, it will have no negative consequences for you. I'd rather you tell me what you think and what you feel, and I'll try to help you. And when I can't help you, I'll tell you why I can't help you. If I disagree with you and it has happened, I'll tell you why I disagree with you, right? And if I have to say no, and Jason's grinning because I have said no to him from time to time, you know, I hope that you understand why, right? And that openness is what I will always put on the table, and what it's a core value that I live by, right? So, and I'll continue with that, you know, as long as I'm your dean, and hopefully that will have a positive benefit. So with that thought, I'll leave you. I want to thank you again for coming, to those that are here in person, to those that are virtually. I think this was recorded, so you'll have an access to the recording to share, as well as the slides with all the information. And again, thanks for everything. Thanks for allowing me to have fun with you. So. Thank you.